Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Employment Committee meeting. I'm Councillor the chair of this committee. It's the first committee meeting I'm chairing since been appointed as chair at the council AGM. So bear with me if I'm kind of just working out the process. I think I've got it relatively straight in my head, but you never know what happens. So firstly, just going to kick off with a couple of housekeeping announcements as per usual. So in terms of the fire alarm, if the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts, and please assemble at Queen Victoria's statue in front of the civic offices. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust Fire Marshal regulations, if you signed into the Guildhall, please remember to sign out when you leave the building after today's meeting. May I also draw everyone's attention to the fact that this meeting will be live streamed and that the camera zooms in to show the speaker. This is linked to the microphones, therefore can I please remind all attendees to turn their microphones on to speak and then off again once you've finished speaking. Members of the public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. And please be advised that the public seating area is not in view of the camera used to webcast this meeting. We haven't got anyone up there anyway. So, just before we get into the deputations and the bulk of the agenda, if we just go around and do a round of introductions, just so everyone is clear about who everyone is and what their role is here today. As I said at the start of the meeting, my name is Councillor I'm the chair of the committee. And if we work around from my left and round, so if we could start at the back with James.
Thank you, Chair. I'm James Harris. I'm the Senior Local Democracy Officer.
Hi, I'm Gerald Jackson. I'm a Milton Ward Councillor.
Dave Ashmore, one of the Fratton Councillors.
Darren Sanders, Baffin's Ward Councillor.
Councillor Simon Bowsher, Drayton and Farlington, Conservative Councillor.
Sue Page, Finance.
Richard Locke, I'm the Council's Procurement Manager.
Natasha Edmonds, Director of Corporate Services.
Thank you all and welcome. And next is the deputation. So, Rich, this is your section here. Do you want to come forward to... Are you given a deputation, sorry, or have you just come to observe? Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. So in that case, do you want us just to get it read out, or do you want to read it out? Yeah, okay. Has everyone had I know we've only just got to start meeting. Has everyone had a chance, or would it be useful for it to be read out? Okay, I'm going to take that everyone's had a chance to read it and digest the information within it. Okay. So I guess just for the public's benefit, we've got a deputation here from Unite the Union. I won't read the whole thing, but it's signed off by Darren McLeod, who's the Unite Senior Shop Steward at Portsmouth City Council, and the deputation is in support of the recommendations contained within the Real Living Wage report. And there's just a bit of extra information that's been provided in support of that. Okay. So moving on, the deputations have been dealt with. Next, I'll take the first item on the formal agenda, which is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies that have been submitted?
Thank you, Chair. I've not received any apologies for this meeting.
Okay. Okay, fine. Moving on. Item 2, declarations of interest. So do any members have any interest to declare in respect of the items to be considered at this meeting? I will give my usual personal declaration of interest that I am a member of both Unison and Unite the Union, which are mentioned in some of the reports today. Okay, I have to move on. Item 3, the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of March 2022, which was the last Employment Committee meeting. We'll do, I believe it's custom to go through these page by page. Hopefully everyone's had the opportunity to review them before the meeting. So we'll go through them page by page for accuracy, and then if people are happy with them, we will sign them off as a correct record of the meeting. So firstly, page 1 of the minutes. Okay, agreed. Page 2 of the minutes. page 3. And lastly, page 4.
Chair, on page 4, I wonder if you were able to give us an update on item 11.
No update has been provided to me as chair of the committee, but I'm happy to take that away and circulate something outside of the meeting if that's helpful.
I think we'll need to do something reasonably quickly on this, but an update would be helpful.
Okay, no problem. Is there anyone in the room that is informed of an update, Natasha?
Yes, I'm aware that the Chief Executive is in the process of preparing a report for the committee to discuss with yourself as Chair, with a view to bringing a report back at the earliest opportunity.
Okay. Thank you. And again, for the benefit of anyone that's watching in, this is the report that related to the senior management restructure within regeneration. Sanders.
Thanks, Cal. Just because this is so important, it might be useful if the Chief Executive is happy not just to share it with you as Chairman of this committee, but also with the other group leaders as well.
Yep, that's fine. I mean, my intention would be to circulate it to all members of the committee anyway. Natasha?
Sorry, I think, sorry if I wasn't entirely clear. I think it was more a case of discussing with yourself as Chair the timing of a report coming back to the committee rather than agreeing a report. So that was all. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And just a general point on that in terms of information sharing amongst members of the committee, I'm very keen to have kind of an open door policy as chair of the committee. So if there are particular issues that relate to the remit of the committee that members of this committee would like to see reports brought forward on, or there's something maybe that's more appropriate for an offline conversation, then please do feel free to get in touch with me as chair, or of course the officers, in order to have those discussions. Councillor Bosher.
Thanks, Chairman. Just on the time frame of earliest opportunity, which doesn't really put a time frame on it at all. Our next scheduled meeting is the 15th of September, which essentially will be 6 months since we asked for that. I think it is eminently reasonable that earliest opportunity becomes 15th of September, and I don't know whether the rest of the committee agree with me or not.
Simon, can I disagree with you? Because I think we need to have it sooner. And therefore,
I don't disagree with you on that.
And therefore, I would suggest that, because I think it's urgent, that we will need to meet before the 15th of September to look at this, either this month or next month. I suppose we can put a long stop date of the 15th of September, but personally my view is the people working in traffic have been working extremely well over the last few months, and I think they've got proposals of how things would work well for the City Council, but I think to keep them hanging on till the 15th of September might be too long, so I would suggest we should try to get this done quicker than that, even if that means an additional meeting.
I don't disagree with that, Chairman. I just looked at the next scheduled dates and suggested that 6 months was perhaps more than enough time to actually do that, but if it's the will of the committee to go with a special meeting to consider that, I'm happy to support that.
Okay. Yep, I'm seeing nods. Do we think that's feasible?
I think so. It is. I have actually recommended to the Chief Exec that we look to schedule something towards the back end of July or early August, if that's possible, and if the committee are in agreement with that.
Okay, perfect. Yep, so if we proceed on that basis, is everyone happy with the rest of the contents of the minutes? Okay, perfect. I'll sign off as a correct record of the meeting. Thank you. Right, moving on. The next item on the agenda relates to the real living wage reports. It's pages 11 to 20 of your packs, I believe. Item 4 on the agenda. If I could ask Natasha Edmond, our Director of Corporate Services, to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this report just provides a bit more of an update on the issue of the real living wage and makes some further recommendations around how the work can be taken forward. It sets out some of the benefits that there will be from accreditation, particularly focused on the adult social care market, which is where we believe the biggest impact will be from the supply chain point of view. That's based on research that's been undertaken by our procurement colleagues. In January, the committee received a report on the financial analysis as well, on the financial impact of living wage accreditation. There are some benefits, a number of benefits that the supply chain and the market would see from real living wage accreditation. There are also some challenges that are set out in the report. The current economic context is also set out in terms of the market conditions, which have become more challenging since January, and that financial appraisal was presented to this committee, along with some changes that are happening within the social care sector that could give rise to further costs that are as yet unknown, but are enshrined in the Health and Social Care Act. The recommendations in the report are that group leaders nominate members from their group to form a task and finish group to investigate how living wage accreditation can be taken forward through the governance cycle and the budget setting process, with a report back to the committee at its next meeting in September. The committee has, for a number of years now, also committed to paying its staff the real living wage, so the report also makes a recommendation to pay the real living wage to staff who are eligible, to bring their pay up to £9.90 in line with the real living wage rate, and that the committee reiterates its commitment to paying its own staff the real living wage rate on an ongoing basis and reports back annually on the impact of that policy. So that's a summary, but I'll assume that everyone has read the report in detail.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions or comments? Councillor Van Jackson?
Yes, a very helpful and useful report, and thanks, Natasha, for that. Just a couple of suggestions, and I'm happy with all of it. It seems very sensible. We've spent years trying to make sure that we get this to happen, to make sure that this is implemented. There are only two things I'd suggest in terms of amendments to the recommendation. The first is in item 1, if we're going to have this task and finish group, which just seems sensible and I'm happy to do that, I think it's important that we look for a sustainable, this has got to be sustainable. This can't just be one-off money. So I'd like to have some words in paragraph 1 that looks at a sustainable funding, because it seems to me the worst option for people on the very lowest wages is to offer them a one-year fix of temporarily increasing their wages and then reducing it afterwards, which, with respect, was the Labour proposal last year, and I think it was the worst of all possible options, particularly because that would have meant selling off the land for the fire station and police station in Cosham. But I think if we can make sure that it's written in here that we're looking for sustainable funding, then I think that's the right thing to do, to treat people with respect if they're working for the City Council for a contractor. So if we could find a way of adding the word sustainable funding in paragraph 1, so that, or recommendation 1, so that we're doing that. And the second thing, I just want to make sure that in paragraph 3, because this has been as the very helpful thing from Unite says, the real living wage has been and gone on this council for some time. And so it was introduced under our administration, removed under Simon's administration, and then brought back by us. And I think it is, the wording as it is here I think needs to reflect the fact that we are paying the real living wage to everybody who works for the City Council. And I'm not sure that is in here as it should be. So I'm wondering whether we could do an amendment to 3 that not only reiterates commitment to the policy of paying PCC employees the real living wage, but recognises that the administration has made this happen. So we record it as a statement of fact that it is, that the administration has made this happen, because I think it just records how we are. I do remember that in the 4 years when we were out of office and there was a Conservative administration, one of the things I think was most worrying there was that people who we had put onto the real living wage, the people on the lowest salaries, had their salaries frozen for 4 years, while everybody else in the council had a pay rise given to them through the National Pay Awards. And I think it's really important that we never go back to the place where the poorest people working for this City Council don't get a pay rise, while very well paid directors, chief execs, etc., do get a pay rise. And I think that was completely the wrong thing to do. So I think it's with those 2 amendments, and I'm sure James can produce a series of some words to reflect that. I think that's entirely supportable, and it's a good report, and thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van Jackson. Just so we're clear, I think that the change to the first recommendation is clear for me about what it is you're proposing, although I guess we need to work out exactly where those form of words fit within that. In terms of recommendation 3, it sounds like you want to add in some historical context. Is that something that should go in the body of the report? I'm just trying to understand how that fits.
So I think I'd add in, so the committee reiterates its commitment to the policy of paying PCC employees real living wage, comma, and congratulates the administration for having delivered this, comma, and resolves to report annually on the impact of this policy.
Okay. And the first recommendation, do you want to just read out how you'd like that to be worded?
I think in there, if you do, group leaders nominate people to form a task and finish group to investigate how the real living wage accreditation can be brought forward with sustainable funding through the governance cycle. I just want to have the word sustainable funding in there so that we don't do one-off funding.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Councillor Van Jackson. James, are you happy with that as a form of words for the 2 recommendations?
If that amendment's duly proposed, seconded and voted through by the committee.
That's possible if we do that. Okay, that's fine. So I guess we'll take that as a proposal of Councillor Van Jackson. We'll hear other comments and questions, and then at the end of that discussion we'll come back for a vote on those amendments and then on the report either amended or otherwise. Is there anyone else who wishes to comment or ask any questions? Councillor Sanders.
Thank you, Cal. Yeah, like Gerald, I'm happy to second what Gerald has proposed. Like Gerald, I'm happy with the idea of a cross-party task and finish group because we all want to try and make sure that this is sustainable and can be delivered over many, many years. As Unite has said, the cost of living crisis has made this worse. And I think people on the lowest pay in our authority need security. We've also got to recognise different parts of the council are at different stages because they are at a different level of sustainability. So, for instance, the housing revenue account, which I oversee, I've, as the cabinet member for housing, preventing homelessness, I've been clear for the team that all staff and people working for contractors such as Mountjoy are paid the current real living wage, which is £9.90 an hour. That's, as far as I understand, done, as far as I can see. So that's why after this report was published, I've asked officers to confirm whether the position outlined in this report, which is that is not true, is correct or not. I know from past experience that some figures in earlier reports proved to be a little bit inaccurate, so it just helps to check. It's been confirmed to me that is the case for housing contractors, that they are paid at least £9.90 an hour, and I'm awaiting final checks on staff, which I'll share with colleagues. So if these investigations, but also, just to show the political commitment that exists, if those investigations find that any staff are not paid the real living wage, that is to happen forthwith. Because I think our Unison and GMB colleagues need that level of security, but we've also got to recognise that different bits of the organisation are at different stages, and that's why we've got to do it sustainably, particularly for the care sector, in which, as we all know, because we've all seen the figures, there are particular issues. Cal.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sanders. Is that Councillor Bosher?
Yeah, I think Councillor Vernon-Jackson knows exactly where I'm going with this. I don't have a problem with the recommendations as they are on the paper, and I certainly don't have a problem with what he's proposing for recommendation 1 and making sure it's sustainable, because obviously you need the surety in there. I am a bit disappointed that what we have in a report here is moving forward on the real living wage, which is going to be for the benefit of our staff, so therefore it is about the organisation, and yet Councillor Vernon-Jackson is doing his best to get his social media sound bites in there in the case of "it was us what did it." Now, I'm not going to die in a ditch over that, but I am pretty disappointed in what he's trying to do, and I would suggest that for the sake of cross-party unity, it would be best to leave what's in the changes in 1 that he suggested, but to do away with what he's proposing for 3, because it does exactly what it says on the tin. And I'd like to think that he would withdraw that rather than try and politicise something that, quite frankly, the lowest paid in the City Council probably don't care about that. They more care about getting the real living wage.
Thank you, Councillor Bosher. Councillor Ashmore, as the last remaining committee member, is there anything you wish to ask or add, or you're happy with what's been said? I've said everything. Yeah. Okay. Okay, perfect. So I'll make a few brief comments myself, and then we'll move to a vote. We'll take the votes and the recommendations separately, as I know there's a difference of opinion about one of them in particular. Thank you very much for bringing the report, Natasha, and everyone else that's contributed towards it. I think it's really important that we keep this issue on the agenda and keep working together to push it forward until it's in place and until everybody who's working in council services, whether that's directly employed by local authority or outsourced or in privatised services, are also receiving at least the real living wage. I think with the cost of living crisis that people are facing around the city and around the country, it's more important now than ever to ensure that everybody is paid fairly, and where we as a local authority have direct influence over that, i.e. we're funding the services that people are working in, then I do think that it is kind of crucially important that we ensure that. I'd like to thank officers for including sections within the report about the benefits of the real living wage. I know that it's something that we've had discussions about before. It's very important that we're aware of what the costs are and also the risks of paying people a little bit more, but I think that we need to do that within a context of looking at the wider picture, and I'll come back to you just in a minute, Councillor Vernon-Jackson. So I'd like to thank officers for including a section on the benefits. In terms of the recommendations, I think it's a sensible way to take it forward in terms of having a cross-party group to look at this. Clearly, we know there is going to be an additional cost to paying people up to living wage. There needs to be some political agreement within the local authority about how that can be funded. So I think it's important that that work is taken away, perhaps offline, over the summer, to be able to hopefully come back to the September meeting to provide some feedback about the outcome of those discussions. And just lastly, I think it is also an important thing that we're kind of mainstreaming the uplift to real living wage for those workers on the lowest pay bands. It became apparent to me during kind of offline discussions that the current processes we had in place is that people were waiting until the outcome of the local government pay reviews until they were then back paid up to the real living wage, which didn't make sense to me because there was already an agreement in place that whatever the outcome of those discussions, they would be paid it. So you may as well pay it people straight up in line with their monthly salaries. So thank you very much also for including that in those recommendations. Councillor Vernon-Jackson, do you wish to come back in?
If that's all right. Firstly, I think you're absolutely right about making sure that people who are paid the real living wage get it from the first available moment. I think pressures on people's budgets and the cost of living crisis are really bad for families. And if people are on very low wages, then actually that extra £10 is hugely important to families' budgets. And so making sure that people get it as soon as possible is right. And my thanks for making sure that we push that through. I think you're absolutely right to highlight that. I think the other bit in the report I think we need to note, because the big cost of this is in adult social care. And I think we need to be aware that there are really big pressures in adult social care coming down the road towards us. There is real concern that government changes in the way adult social care is funded is going to mean that there are going to be very significant cuts to adult social care next year. Because, and not just in Portsmouth, but in councils across the whole of the country. The councils have been extremely successful about negotiating block purchases of beds in care homes and with residential care agencies, and therefore have been able, because we buy in large quantities, have been able, like in with a supermarket, to be able to get a lower price because of that. Government are not allowing that to continue, and that means that the price that the city council will have to pay for services will rise. Now that's going to mean very significant pressure. We're going to need to be advised by Andy Biddle, our Director of Adult Social Care, what the effects of that's going to be. But I think that's still working its way through the system. I think the other bit we really need to be putting on record is the reasons given in the report by private sector organisations for not paying the real living wage. We need to recognise, but I think we have to be explicitly say that we don't agree with them. That if we want to pay the real living wage, it doesn't matter that Hampshire won't, and that might mean people have slightly different pay in Hampshire and Portsmouth, because we want to make sure that we are doing the right thing, even if Hampshire is not doing the right thing. So I think it's useful to have it had in the report, but I think we need to explicitly say we've read the views of these organisations, and we still think it is right to go ahead and do the real living wage. It is really right. Coming back to Simon's point, I think Simon made the point very well why we should put the amendment in, because actually we already pay everybody in the City Council the real living wage, so it won't make any difference to them except in terms of exactly when they're paid it. But I think therefore if people don't recognise that the City Council is currently paying a real living wage to everybody in the employees, then I think it is absolutely right that we are having something in the amendment to say that that is the case.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Van Jackson. Are there any more questions or comments? If not, we'll move swiftly to the vote. Okay, so firstly, in terms of the amendments, Councillor Van Jackson will take it in parts, so we'll take the amendment to recommendation 1 first, please. Could you remind us of your proposed wording before we vote?
In recommendation 1, that we add in the words sustainable funding in line 3, and so it becomes group leaders nominate members for tasking from their group to form a task and finish group to investigate how the living wage accreditation can be taken forward with sustainable funding through the government cycle and budget setting process, and report back to the committee with recommendations at its next meeting in September.
Okay, thank you. And is that seconded by Councillor Sanders? It is. Okay, perfect. So we'll now put that first amendment to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you very much. That was unanimous. That passes and amends the report. In terms of the second amendment, that's to recommendation 3, and again that comes from Councillor Van Jackson. Could you remind us of your proposed wording?
So it becomes the committee reiterates its commitment to the policy of paying PCC employees the real living wage, comma, and congratulates the administration for making this happen, comma, and resolves to report annually on the impact of this policy.
Thank you very much. And is that seconded by Councillor Sanders? It is. Okay. Again, I'll put that proposed amendment to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? And any abstentions? Okay, that amendment also passes.
Can I just ask?
Yeah.
item 2, number 2, it talks about 22-23. This should happen continuously in future years, automatically, without it having to come back here to committee. Do we need to have anything in that says that when the Living Wage Foundation recommends that the rates go up, we automatically do that without coming back to the committee? It might be in there already, and Natasha can tell us if I've misread.
Yes,
It simply reflects the current rate, but what we could do is add in to recommendation 3 that the policy of paying PCC employees the current real living wage rate, so that reflects whatever that current rate is.
And should be implemented.
Because it changes every year.
Yeah, exactly. And I just want to make sure that we get it in automatically, so we don't have to make...
Or the prevailing real living wage rate.
So, Cal, do you think that's a sensible thing to do, or...?
Yeah, I think so. I think that was the intention.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right.
And I think it was implied within the wording. But yeah, it's worth formalising that. So do you want to propose an amendment?
Yeah, well, I think it's something like the lines that there'd been automatic uplift to the real living wage rate whenever that is issued by the Living Wage Foundation.
So it's the Real Living Wage Foundation normally I set the rate in the November after the budget, and then for implementation by the subsequent May the following year. We normally will apply it from April.
Okay. Is that all right? That sounds sensible.
Yeah, that's fine. So, I mean, are you proposing to add that in then?
Well, I think it just makes it... I think for people on the low wages, it's really important that we're really clear that this will happen automatically, and there'll be an automatic uplift.
Okay, that's fine. But just for the record, then it then reads...
and that there'll be an automatic uplift to the real living wage as defined by the Living Wage Foundation each year.
Okay. Are you happy, James, in terms of that as a form of words? Have you got that for the records? We'll put it to the vote, but...
It might just be clear just for all present if the entire recommendation was just read out as amended, just so that everyone's clear what they're voting on.
Okay. So, the committee reiterates its commitment to policy of paying PCC employees the real living wage and congratulates the administration for making this happen, and resolves to report annually the impact of this policy, and that real living wage recommendations from the Living Wage Foundation will automatically be uplifted for PCC employees each year. Does that sound right, Cal?
Turn your microphone on, please, Simon.
Perhaps I'm being a bit of a pedant here, but we've already amended and voted on recommendation 3. I hear what you're trying to say, and I don't disagree with it, but would it not be better to actually add that to recommendation 2, which hasn't been amended, and then at least we've got the... We're not going to fall foul of Peter Bolf and his baseball bat if we're not careful.
I'm hoping Councillor Sanders has formal words for us here.
Well, I can't vouch for that, but I'll give it a go. So, yeah, I agree with Simon. It's actually the best place for it, guys. So what I'm suggesting is that at the end, so I'll read out the second recommendation as it is now with my words added at the end, if that's okay, which is for, sorry about that. Which is for, so recommendation 2 is for PCC staff currently in receipt of pay below the 22-23 real living wage rate to be paid an uplift to £9.90 to bring their rate in line with the current RLW rate, pending RLW rate. It says pending the outcome of the national pay negotiations.
What we're trying to avoid is connecting it to the national pay negotiations.
That's right. So replace pending the outcome of the national pay negotiations.
Because they can go on for years.
That's okay. Welcome to local... Okay. Welcome to local government. Right. So I'll go again. So I'm in the interest of peace and harmony. So recommendation 4 then becomes that in future the real living wage is automatically uplifted.
Is that sufficient?
In line with the recommendations of the Living Wage Foundation.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's okay.
Does this survive democratic services?
It's got a lot of scribbling there.
So committee, just to be clear, so the recommendation 4 to be added, that in future the real living wage is automatically uplifted in line with the recommendations of the Real Living Wage Foundation.
It's not the Real Living Wage Foundation, it's just the Living Wage Foundation.
If that's
For PCC staff.
Okay. Proposed by Councillor Sanders.
I am mildly content with what Mr. Harris has said.
Seconded. Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Right. That's all the recommendations, all the amendments now agreed. So now I believe we vote on the report as amended. So with the 4 recommendations, recommendation 1 amended, recommendation 3 amended, and the addition of recommendation 4. So if I can take a vote on all those in favour of the report as amended. Thank you very much. That's unanimous. So that passes. Now move on.
And can we thank Natasha for the report? I thought it was a very good, well-written report.
Yeah, thank you very much, Natasha, and everyone else that has fed into that. Okay, moving on. Item number 5, everyone's favourite sickness absence quarterly report. It's pages 21 to 30 of your report pack. And I believe this report is going to be introduced by Alison Forfar, our Assistant Director of HR. Thank you, Alison.
Thank you, Chair. So just giving you an update in terms of comparison to the last quarter. Figures of sickness absence have slightly increased, albeit the decrease was slightly down in comparison to the start of the coronavirus pandemic. The quarter average day per person per year, as reported at the last Employment Committee, was running at 10.11%, and it has increased to 11.37%. The long-term sickness absence has slightly increased, not significantly, but enough for us to be aware about, is 6.2% to 6.27%. And the short-term increase in comparison to last quarter reported, 2.16 to 2.82. Full breakdown of all of the stats obviously are within the appendices within this report. Interestingly to note, we've ranked the sickness, and the top 3 ranked sickness reported this quarter still stays with coronavirus. Second one is stress, anxiety and depression, and the third one is musculoskeletal, which is lower limb. Excuse me. However, having said that, if we actually combined the musculoskeletal, get my words out there, for neck and lower limb, actually those reasons for sickness absence would be ranked number 1. So in terms of what we are trying to do to mitigate some of the sickness absence, but equally so to be able to support our staff, is we have been running some quite successful campaigns at the moment, which is attributed to our wellbeing activities. So we know they're relatively successful because the computer analysis people actually can report back to us, which is really good data intelligence, and evidence is our friend. We can report that campaigns promoted on, we've been having a hit rate of 57% of those various methodologies we've been approaching to supporting our staff with health and wellbeing. So I won't go through it all verbatim, but I think interestingly enough is the various types of methods that we are approaching, because we understand people have different needs, and these are various ones. So we have toolkits, guidance, we have hotline, we've got a very successful employee assistance programme, which is a confidential service, and we have recognised some of the more pressing issues due to mental health. There are key ones, and we've talked today about the cost of living. So we have focused on supporting our employees by recognising, number one, financial pressures have significant health significant effect on your mental health and well-being, and so therefore we have set up mechanisms whereby people can get support in how they can manage and signpost to some support, albeit it's never going to solve the whole issue of some of the financial pressures that people are suffering at the moment. The other key thing on mental health that we have through the evidence and so forth, so we've been promoting at pace, is focusing on loneliness. And there's various reasons that people suffer from this, but one of the good things that certainly in the feedback that we have been receiving is that people feel that they do have a place to go in order to seek support, advice and guidance. And then finally on that one, because it's all detailed in the report, is we are really focusing and supporting not just our staff, but giving managers the understanding and the support to recognise some of these problems that people are having pertaining to their health, well-being and mental health. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Alison. Members, any questions or comments on the report? Councillor Bosher.
Thank you, Chair. And as ever, Alison, it's a comprehensive report. I have my perennial moan, if I can. It's in grey again. Well, my copy is. And looking at the tables on Appendix 1, certainly the bar chart at the top and the varying shades of grey don't necessarily assist too much. A colour version would be useful, at least for the benefit of the members of the committee. I've got two questions about Appendix 2, and you sort of touched on one about the musculoskeletal aspects of it, and we got the back and neck and the lower limb and the fact that it's increased. I'd be interested to know, and this is something perhaps you could, if you don't have, you can circulate, is what's the breakdown between those that are working within the civic offices and those that are working from home, and where those sit? Because I'm home-based in my job and I'm out and about, and I have been for a number of years. So you can imagine that my home setup is, as far as my company is concerned, is almost office-like. And I appreciate we may well go through sort of self-assessments with staff, but for people that might be working 5, 6, 7, 8 hours at a kitchen table, I'm not surprised that they might be suffering from back and neck injuries. So a breakdown between home and office working would be useful to get a better understanding of where that actually is, which I think would also give you guys a better understanding of what we need to address those people that are still working from home. And if we're moving to a more hybrid method of working going forward, then obviously that's something that we as the employment committee and ultimately the employers need to make sure that the staff have everything that they possibly can to eradicate as much as we possibly can these sorts of avoidable injuries from that point of view. And the other one I've got, which just out of curiosity was, it is a small one, but I'm just interested, perhaps it's just me, is the one that's down the bottom, substance misuse, with 103 days lost to alcohol and drugs. Are we talking illegal drugs or prescription drugs or, hangovers or whatever? I just want to get an understanding of what that covers, because that might be a black and white statement, but I think there's a lot of shades of grey attached to that one.
There's a long and a short answer. So the short answer to the issue on alcohol and drugs is I don't know, but we'll go away and investigate and come back to you. With regard to the upper and lower limb absences, it's not so straightforward as a working from home versus civic office. The predominant conditions for upper and lower limb absences are in actually jobs that are not desk-based. They are jobs that involve physical people handling, manual handling. So a lot of that will be in the adult social care space. Some of that will be in services such as Green and Clean, where there's a physical demand on the job. So absolutely we can get that broken down a bit further. One of the things that we did commit to in the previous employment committee was to provide a lot more granular analysis around this data. We are working on that. As you know, we're currently implementing the HR element of the Fusion system, which is the new HR system. So we're developing the reporting capability in that system to start to delve into some of this. So the aspiration is that we will be bringing back to this committee that granular level of detail so we can show you. The challenge from a sickness absence point of view that we have between home and office-based working is more in the stress and anxiety space, interestingly, where we are seeing staff anxious about coming back into an office environment, but also incidences of increased isolation and loneliness for staff that are working from home that don't necessarily have the environment, partners, families, contacts that they would normally have in an office environment. So it's a quite a complicated picture of all of the different causes and types of services where that absence relates to. But I did commit in the last committee meeting to bring you more detail, and we are working on it, so we'll provide that.
Just one follow-up if I can,
Yeah,
Cal.
sure.
You mentioned about the anxiety of returning to the office environment. As I seem to understand, and you probably know the name of the working party better than I do, but there is a working party in place to come back to do the return to work. Has that working party met, and how is it progressing?
So actually discussed this with the Cabinet Member for Communities and Central Services just yesterday, because that was a topic that was discussed at the portfolio meeting. We did ask for nominations from each group. There is still one group that we are outstanding some nominations for, so I'm going to be I've got yours, yes, thank you. So I will be following that up with a relevant group leader with a view to getting that as a connectivity working group up and running to progress that work.
Thank you very much. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Sanders?
Thanks, Cal. Just to extend Simon's point about musculoskeletal to coronavirus as well, because it looks as if the two services where there are the biggest amount of absences are the two services that are most likely to be out of home, which is adult services, understandably, and also the housing, neighbourhood building services, which is Clean and Green. So we're Cal and I have been on a meeting this morning with an officer who unfortunately has the virus. Luckily that was online, which shows some dedication of some people. So it'd be interesting to see how that works, because that will also shape the connectivity working group. Because what we don't want is to have lots of people coming back to the office, they all fall down with the virus and everybody falls down again, particularly as the virus levels are increasing. So I would hope that the working group would do that. But do we have any sense with coronavirus as well, with musculoskeletal, as to what the balance is between working outside or working in an office or working from home?
So I think one of the successes over the last 2 years has actually been the council's approach to staff and resident safety for coronavirus. We've been very fortunate to have very, very few workplace outbreaks because of the approach that we've taken. Part of the work that is currently underway is to make sure that we continue to operate in a safe way. You're absolutely right that the areas and directorate services where we've seen the most prevalence of coronavirus are in those services that have more close contact with people, so particularly adult social care and environments like that. But of course, with the technology and facilities that we have in place now, we are seeing a number of staff who are getting coronavirus, but who are continuing to work because they are not so ill that they need to be in bed, but are well enough to continue working online and don't feel that they have to actually take any time off sick. So we've been quite fortunate with a very, very dedicated group of staff who want to carry on working. Obviously, where people are symptomatic and are ill, they're being encouraged to take the time to get well. But where staff are able to, they do have the facility to continue working. But there is a correlation, as you point out, Darren, between those services where there is close contact with people and those that have less so.
Thank you. Councillor Ashmore.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I don't think it's any surprise that COVID tops the list of absences or reasons for absence and sickness over the last couple of years. And it's really good to see the ways in which things are being addressed to try and help people through all the things you've listed down there. That's a real credit that people are managing to soldier on through a lot of these things. And it's also helpful that a lot of things are being addressed. You know, I can think wouldn't have been that long ago generationally that things like stress and anxiety, mental health, men's mental health, etc., would even be considered. So that's really good to see on here. Just a couple of questions on there. It's got on the absence reasons at number 16. It just says blank, and unless I've not heard something that refers to, it just says blank. I don't know. Yeah.
That's where people have failed to put in a reason for their absence.
Fair enough. It's an actual don't know, and that's the 16th top reason.
Sorry.
Okay, and obviously that's a really good and mature thing that we're doing there, because obviously not everybody wants to fill it down. The only other thing I've got is, I know it wouldn't go down as an absence, but when we were talking about things like online working or people that have COVID and can't come in, if they can't come in and they have COVID, but they can still do online meetings, how does that get put down? Is it like they're sick, but they're still working? Is there a particular designation for that?
If they're still working, they're not sick.
Fair enough. But I don't know if it's useful enough for us to have it as a kind of, they've had it, just so we've got a record of it.
We aren't able to record that, and it's down to the individual if they are sick. There is a sickness policy that means that if they carry on working when they're sick, that would be recorded as an absence, and they would be developing an absence record that over time would potentially accumulate. We do monitor sickness absence levels. Managers are tasked with monitoring sickness absence levels in their staff, and if it becomes excessive, then obviously we'll take management action around that. No staff would want to put themselves down as sick and accumulate an absence record when they were actually working, and potentially affect their pay as well over time as well.
Thank you very much. As I say, I think everyone's been a credit on soldiering on over the last few years, especially with what's been going on, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
Thanks, Chair. Just a request, I just wondered if it might be helpful at some point to have a report on the Occupational Health Service in terms of what they do to help people back into work, but also the work they do, I think, to support managers if that's not possible, to try to make sure that we get a proper outcome. But I just think a just a better understanding of it might be really quite useful, if that would be okay.
Yep, that sounds like a sensible suggestion to me, and I'm seeing nods from officers, so I think we can look at bringing that to a future meeting. Thank you. Any further questions or comments on this report? No, okay, so just quickly for me, thank you again for bringing the report. I think it is useful for us to understand on an ongoing basis how sickness is affecting the workforce and what those knock-on impacts may well be on services. I think it's also really useful to get an insight into the health and wellbeing support that is made available to staff to try and ensure that any avoidable sickness perhaps is avoided, and kind of ensuring that our staff and our workforce are looked after as best we can. So thank you very much for bringing the report. We'll now move to recommendations, and then after recommendations, and we've taken a report, I just want to have a quick word about how these reports might be brought forward to future meetings. So, members, it is recommended that the Employment Committee notes 1, the levels and causes of sickness absence over the last quarter, 2, the activities and interventions undertaken to support attendance, and 3, the changes in absence levels across the organisation. Is the report noted, members? Agreed? Yep, thank you very much. Just a quick note then in terms of how these reports are brought forward to future meetings. One of the discussions I had with officers since becoming chair is about which reports come forward to meetings and ensuring that we've got an appropriate mix, an appropriate kind of schedule over the course of the year. One of the questions I asked as part of that is why we have sickness absence reports on a quarterly basis. Is there a good reason for that, or is it more perhaps historical convention, the way things have always been done? The impression I get is maybe it's more the latter, and I think from discussions I've had with council officers that there may be benefit perhaps to changing that schedule. My suggestion would be to 6 monthly, on the basis that then perhaps gives us a longer period of time over which to monitor trends. I think if you're looking at things quarterly, it can be hard to see the bigger picture there. And also discussion around that perhaps freeing up capacity within those 6 monthly reports to delve a little bit more into the detail and provide more analysis rather than just presentation of data, a better understanding of exactly what the trends are and some of those kind of underlying factors within that. So, I mean, that's my suggestion as chair. I do want to obviously do things in a kind of collective and transparent manner. So if there are views within the room, please do let us know. If you feel strongly that it should be quarterly, then do let us know. But I personally think that moving to 6 monthly would be beneficial to us as committee and beneficial to officers in terms of looking at this in a kind of constructive and effective way. Is there any opposition to moving to 6 monthly reporting, Councillor Bosher?
I'm not opposing it, I'm quite happy with it, but I would suggest that if there are any questions that come out of a sickness report that need addressing, that we ain't waiting 6 months to get that answer. That should come back as something separate at the next meeting, if you see what I mean. Yeah. That normally happens with the gas committee, where we could get minutes with questions that were raised, and normally when we get to the next meeting, those questions are raised in the minutes, so to speak, and where possible, there is a bolded response to it where they've been away and found the information. So that might be a useful way of adopting it. I wouldn't want to think that we're going to wait 6 months for any feedback that we had, but I'm happy with the fact that it is quite detailed. It probably takes an awful lot of officer time to understand it, and doing it quarterly probably is a stretch.
Yeah, I think that's a sensible suggestion, and I'm assuming that's going to be possible. Get nods. Okay, yeah, so we'll adopt that as our practice moving forward, then move to 6 monthly reporting, but at the next meeting after those reports we will pick up any outstanding issues or questions. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda, we've got item number 6, which is the Trade Union Facilities Time 2021-22 report on pages 31 to 42 within your packs. And again, I think we're looking to Alison to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Trade union facility times. This report is a statutory obligation, and that is something of which we have to report accordingly. The report is published on the PCC website, and obviously the report on trade union facility time is maintained on the government website as well. So in terms of trade union facility time, we have 13 trade union people that are using the facilities time, which is funded. The funding of that is 75,000 per year, which is something that the organisation finds invaluable in the positive, proactive and collaborative working relationship that we have with trade unions. So that's all I've got in terms of that. As we know, it's a statutory obligation to have that within the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison. Questions or comments? Councillor Vanna Jackson.
Well, thanks. It was a helpful report. I just wonder whether it be sensible to add a additional recommendation to thank the trade unions for the support they do give in the successful running of the City Council.
Being a pedant again, it's an item for information only. I think you can put it in the minutes, and I don't disagree with that, but there are no recommendations attached to an information-only report.
I've got some recommendations in my agenda for this item. I have 1 and 2. I was going to make a recommendation 3 where there are already 2. But wherever it appears, it appears. So, but as long as I think we just need to recognise that actually it helps the running of the City Council to have good relationships, constructive relationships with trade unions.
Yep. I'm going to defer here to Democratic Services. James, is it possible for us to introduce a recommendation that passes on thanks to trade unions as suggested?
I would suggest probably recording it within the body of the minute text rather than an additional recommendation. Whilst we do have 2 recommendations, they are both recommendations that recommendations 1 and 2 are noted in effect, so it's not a decision as such.
I'm trying to note our thanks as well.
Yeah, so, I mean, James suggested that we can note our thanks within the main body of the report.
I think it's better as a recommendation, but I'm not going to die in a ditch.
Let's go with the steer of Democratic Services, seeing as that's what they're here to support us with. So let's come back to that. Let's take questions or comments, and then we'll try and resolve that once people have had a moment to dwell on it. Natasha, did you want to come in on that point?
Just to say, the report is actually, the purpose of this is because we have a statutory duty to report on facilities time, so it might be more appropriate to record and note the thanks to the unions in the minutes of the meeting rather than in the covering report to what is a statutory obligation.
That makes sense to me. Okay. Councillor Saunders.
Thank you. I won't die in a ditcher for this one either, to be honest. It is getting pretty good to have all of us in it by the time we're finished. Simon has his perennial bugbears, and mine is in this report. You talk about the amount of time spent as 1 to 50% and 50 to 99%. Can that be broken down still further? Because I mean, if we've got the bucket loads of trades unionists who are spending, 9.99% of their time on trades union activities, which I think is the case, then it's a bit pointless to sort of have them in a category that says 1 to 50.
I think we can report to the committee, however the committee would like. However, what is in the content is a statutory method of reporting, so we have to report it in this way. But if the committee would like to have a further breakdown on how facilities time is used in the council, we can certainly do that separately.
I think that would be helpful, and I think the context for that is that there has been a sense that essentially, people are spending all their time on trades union activities, which I know is true in other authorities and other places in a couple of cases, but I think it would just be useful to have the truth. But yes, I know this is how we have to do it statutorily. I agree with the cynicism that Simon is relaying on this. I think the other thing to note is actually how much value for money having this level of facilities time is done. It notes in the report the approach of the Liberal Democrat budget in 2020 to increase the amount of money spent on facilities time for trades unions from 37.5 to 75,000, which the director recommends we continue with, and certainly I would recommend we continue with, because actually having local trades unions who know everything on the ground is incredibly helpful in facilitating good relationships. We know during the pandemic, one of the interesting things was how relationships between the management and the unions got better. And actually that led to better authority. And that's why certainly I would support the view of the director in that. We can't probably note it in a noting report. But certainly it seems a better way forwards, and it's more productive for everyone. So just again to thank the trades unions for their help in making sure we're a better authority.
Thank you, Councillor Sanders. Any additional questions or comments? Councillor Jackson.
So, if that's all right, I just wonder if at some point it would be helpful to look at whether the facilities time that trade unions, we fund for trade unions, saves the council money or not. Because it's been a consistent question over years. My feeling is that the help they give with disciplinaries and stuff like that means that the organisation works better. But it actually would be quite interesting to see a report that says that or says that I'm wrong.
I'm actually have asked the unions to progress that piece of work already. So it's on the way.
So Natasha, I don't think I'm sure the unions can give advice, but it's not a report from the unions, because we will all justify how wonderful we are and how incredibly great value we add to the organisation. It needs to be a dispassionate report that looks at what they say and says, is this accurate or not? So I'm terribly sorry, it'll have to come from Alison, being a dispassionate and independent observer.
We could certainly provide a report from officers on that, and as is outlined in the report, certainly I think we have a good relationship with the unions, and I don't think it is going to be a big stretch to be able to evidence the greater effectiveness and efficiency of how we operate as a result of that good relationship. So we can certainly do that.
If that would be all right with you, Chair.
Yeah, that sounds sensible to me. Thank you. Alison? Thank you. Members, any additional comments or questions on this report? No? Okay, just a few for me then. Obviously, this is a statutory report that has to be brought every year as a requirement of government legislation, but I do think it is a useful reminder to us, as the discussion has shown, about the role that trade unions do play within the operation of the local authority. I think there is a clear case to be made, and it would be interesting to see any information that can be provided around kind of value for money and savings. As Alison has indicated, if a trade union rep has time to kind of informally have a chat with someone, or informally have a chat with a manager that may nip something in the buds that doesn't necessarily need to go to a formal kind of grievance or disciplinary process that could well drag on for months and months, that is straight off the bat a significant cost saving to local authority, and a very good example of why I think it's important that we do have this quite limited budget that makes time available for people within their working week in order to fulfil those duties. I do think it's also important just to kind of reflect on the funding arrangements, and clearly, as has been noted, they have varied over the year and are still probably relatively precarious. I think there is a need for kind of a longer term funding settlement around that looks at, again, the benefits to local authority and the kind of relatively small cost, I would say, against the total pay bill of that facility time, and ensuring that we've got something that is kind of sustainable in the long term and ensuring that all parties benefit from that. And just lastly, I guess as the chair of the committee, to again highlight the points that have been made around the constructive industrial relations that we have, I think, on this local authority that is very much recognised by all parties involved. And people and I do have close links with many of the local trade unions, and that is something they very much echo from their side as well. They value those close working relationships. There are, I think, quite a significant number of committees and bodies where issues can be raised to try and ensure that issues are addressed. Clearly not everyone will agree, and I don't think either party would be doing their job properly if everyone did always agree within those forums, but at least there's those channels of communication and those strong working relationships that ensure that people are able to raise issues and hopefully get them addressed in a way that they feel is satisfactory. So, moving to the recommendations, members, it's recommended that the Employment Committee notes 1, the data in Appendix 1 and the fact that the appendix will be the report published on the PCC website and the government maintained website, and 2, that the data will be included in any relevant annual report and accounts that are published by PCC. And I think a kind of side note that's not a recommendation but something we want to collectively put into the minutes is a kind of a note of thanks, I guess, or a message of thanks to the trade unions and to council officers who are responsible for working alongside them. Are the recommendations agreed, members? Agreed? Agreed. Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, Councillor Sanders. Okay, moving on, probably something that's not going to take us a whole lot of time, I hope. Item 7, the appointment to the Hampshire Pension Fund panel and boards. So, James, I understand you are going to introduce this item.
Yep, thank you, Chair. As members who have served on this committee previously will be aware, it's an annual duty of this committee to appoint a councillor to sit on the Hampshire Pension Fund panel and board. The councillor appointed the position represents the 2 unitary authorities of Portsmouth and Southampton, and there are 2 positions each year, one for the full member and one for the deputy member. The roles alternate between Portsmouth City Council and Southampton City Council, but this year the Portsmouth City Council appointment will be the full appointment with Southampton as the deputy. I'm aware that we've had an expression of interest from Councillor Judith Smythe. Thank you.
Members, on that basis, I'd like to propose Councillor Judith Smythe to this position. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Van Jackson looks very happy to second that proposal. Thank you. Is that agreed?
I was going to nominate Councillor Atkins on the basis he wasn't here to say no, but as Judith... Yes. Yes. So, but if Judith's happy to do it, that's great.
Perfect. So I'm taking that to be agreed by the committee. Thank you very much. I will say, I mean, as the previous holder of this position, it is a challenging role. There's a lot of kind of very complex financial information, but clearly it's also a very important role that this member plays on behalf of the local authority, looking after the pensions of our current staff and also our retired staff. Yeah, there's a lot of information to get to, but it's very important work, and also something that just kind of feedback some of the main issues that I was able to push during that time and put onto the agenda, particularly issues around the climate crisis and the fact that local government pensions are still, including the Hampshire Pension Fund, still invested in things like fossil fuels, and talking about the kind of transition moving forwards to try and reduce and kind of get out of those investments, while at the same time, of course, ensuring that people's pensions are protected and not put at risk. So it is an important bit of work, and I'm sure Judith will do a good job. Councillor Ashmore?
Yeah, I was going to ask that, actually, because obviously it's come to the Employment Committee. It's my first time here. I don't know what scope we cover. So obviously this is something that's relevant to this committee. Because I was just going to wonder what happened, because obviously you, like me, have been wondering about divesting from things like fossil fuels and into more renewables with our pension, but we're told, you know, the law as it is says, no, you have to invest, well, you'll know more than me, you've got to invest in something that's going to get your money back. So there's like legal confusion. We can't just, like as Portsmouth City Council, go, well, we're taking ours elsewhere. Is there a way of getting any information back on the progress? Because as you mentioned, you've brought it up there. Is there any way we can get some report back or some update on how that's going, just so we've got something to pass on to our residents?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that Judith is particularly interested in working on that topic, so I'm sure it's something that she'd be willing to enter discussions on. There are, I mean, it's a public committee, the Hampshire Pension Funds, made up of all the local authorities and some other employers within Hampshire. They do publish an annual report that does contain a small section within the annual report about issues such as kind of divestment from fossil fuels. So there is some information within the public domain. But yeah, I think it's definitely something that is worth kind of keeping on the agenda and ensuring that we, as elected councillors, are kind of working with Judith as our representative on there to ensure that that is pushed forward. Yeah, it's kind of complex, like you say. There are rules around ensuring kind of best value or that investments are protected. But I think one of the things I found out is that increasingly there is a strong argument that divestment from fossil fuels is the kind of financially beneficial thing to do in the long run, given the trajectory of those investments.
Chair, I'm overjoyed that things like that are being looked at. I haven't been on it for years, but I was, and they were very keen to say the only thing they were interested in is the level of profit. I think if they could have invested in things that are illegal but brought big profits, they'd have been very happy to do so. But I found that really restricting in what they would look at in terms of criteria. When I tried to push them to invest in creating jobs in Hampshire and creating things here, not even slightly interested, because that might reduce the level of profit, and it was profit that they were interested in. Which is their job is to make sure that people are able to get their pensions properly, and I think it's one of the things that local government does really well. Central government, people pay their contributions into their pension fund if you're a nurse, if you're in the forces or whatever, or a civil servant, and the government takes that money and spends it. We and local government have done it very differently, so with us we take those contributions that the members of staff pay into their pension, and we save it and we invest it. I think it is an enormous difference between the long-term sensible financial planning that councils do and the deeply irresponsible financial lack of planning that central government does.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne-Jackson. Yeah, and just lastly, I guess to reassure you, the culture and the attitude of the board when I was on it has changed quite a lot from those days, and now it is a position where every single representative is, at least in rhetoric, fully signed up to the climate change agenda. I think sometimes there may be a little bit of a gap between rhetoric and action, as quite often is the case, but certainly I think progress is being made. Okay. Thank you, members. That concludes the business on the agenda for this meeting. I thank you all for your attendance and close the meeting at 3:16.
And thank you for chairing it so well.
Thank you.